$300 million was sitting inside a single email attachment, and Priya Menon had less than 2 hours to decide what to do about it. She had just learned that Meridian Logistics, the only serious rival in the race for Jakarta's new container terminal, was already finalizing its own bid. The official deadline for the Tanjung Priok port concession was still 4 days away, but somebody at Meridian believed that arriving first would matter more than anything written inside the proposal. Meridian had built its reputation on exactly that instinct. In 3 previous tenders across the region, they had submitted first every single time, and they had won 2 of them. Priya had studied that pattern carefully, and she had drawn exactly the wrong lesson from it. Today's saying is, the early bird catches the worm. But almost everyone misunderstands it. Let me tell you a story. Hello and welcome to Sense and Sound English. I'm Alice Frost, and I've spent most of my career inside rooms where decisions worth hundreds of millions get made in minutes. I'm not here to teach you English the way a textbook would. I'm here to show you how it actually sounds when intelligent people are under pressure, negotiating, and trying not to make a mistake they can't undo. Let's go back to that email. The call connecting the 2 of them spanned 3 time zones at once. Priya was in Jakarta, where it was already close to midnight. Marcus was in London, where the afternoon was just beginning. I was in Singapore, somewhere in between, which is usually where I do my best listening. Solace Maritime had spent 6 months preparing a proposal to expand and operate a new terminal at one of Southeast Asia's busiest ports. Priya was leading the project, and she had earned that role the hard way. A year earlier, Solace had lost a smaller contract in Vietnam simply because a competitor submitted 2 days sooner. She had never forgotten that lesson, and she wasn't about to repeat it. If we wait, Meridian submits first, she told the room. And once a client sees one proposal, every other one feels like a copy. Marcus, the company's CFO, wasn't so sure. He had flown in from London the night before, and he still hadn't checked the final tariff calculations himself. I'd like to look at the numbers one more time before anything goes out, he said. Notice how he says, I'd like to look, instead of I want to look. It's a small choice, but in a room full of people under pressure, it sounds far less demanding, and far more collaborative. Priya wasn't convinced that one more review was worth the risk of losing their lead. We've checked it 3 times already, she said. If we wait for a 4th, someone else gets the client's attention first. I was on the call from Singapore, listening more than speaking, because that's usually when you learn the most. I asked one question. What happens if the numbers are wrong, and you've already submitted? Nobody answered right away. That silence told me everything I needed to know about how the story was going to unfold. If you're enjoying learning English through stories like this one, consider subscribing. Every episode explores how real communication shapes real decisions, in rooms very similar to this one. Now, back to Jakarta. The room split almost immediately. 2 of the junior consultants sided with Priya, arguing that Meridian's aggressive timeline left no room for hesitation. Marcus held his ground. We can still make the deadline tonight, he said. We don't have to make it in the next 10 minutes. That distinction matters more than it sounds. In English, we have to often signals urgency created by circumstances, while we don't have to simply remove a false deadline someone invented under pressure. Priya finally agreed to 30 more minutes, though her tone made it clear she considered it a concession, not a victory. While Marcus opened the spreadsheet, someone mentioned a rumor that Meridian's team had been working through the night, fueled by nothing but coffee and confidence. The tender was published 3 months ago, Priya said. They've had exactly as much time as we have. Notice the passive voice there. The tender was published, instead of someone published the tender. It shifts attention away from who did something, and puts it entirely on the fact itself, which is exactly what a strategist does when emotion starts to outrun logic. Marcus opened the spreadsheet, and 30 minutes turned out to be exactly enough. He found the problem almost by accident, buried inside a formula nobody had questioned since the first draft. The tariff table calculated berth fees using the wrong currency conversion, a mistake that would have undercut their own revenue projections by nearly 11%. If we'd submitted tonight, he said quietly, We would have promised a price we couldn't actually deliver. Priya went pale. She hadn't looked for a mistake, because she had been too focused on being early. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply said, "This is exactly why I wanted one more look." Daniel, the youngest analyst on the team, had actually flagged something similar days earlier, in a comment nobody had opened. "I left a note in the shared file on Tuesday," he said. "I wasn't sure if it mattered enough to bring up in a meeting." Marcus turned to him. "It mattered enormously. You were on the ball, and none of us noticed." Daniel spoke up again, quieter than before. "Well, we're already reopening the file. Can we confirm the customs clearance appendix? I want to be sure it matches the tender's latest wording." Marcus nodded. "Good instinct. Add it to the list." It took less than 10 minutes to confirm, but it was 10 minutes nobody else in the room had thought to spend. That phrase, "on the ball," describes someone who stays alert, prepared, and attentive, even when nobody is watching. It has almost nothing to do with sport anymore, even though that's where it started. It has everything to do with being the kind of person who notices the detail everyone else missed. The team had less than 90 minutes left before the office closed for the night. Priya made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "We're not submitting until this is fixed," she said. "Even if it means losing the lead." Marcus looked almost relieved. "I was hoping you'd say that." They spent the next hour rebuilding the tariff model, checking it against 3 independent sources, and reading every clause in the client's original request one final time. At 11:40, Priya sent the corrected proposal, still hours ahead of the official deadline, but no longer first. Meridian had already submitted theirs earlier that evening. For a moment, it looked like speed had won after all. If this feels more useful than memorizing isolated vocabulary, subscribe to the channel. That's exactly how Sense and Sound English was designed, one real decision at a time. Priya barely slept that night, replaying the decision to slow down at the worst possible moment. She kept checking her inbox every few minutes, as if refreshing it could somehow change what had already been submitted. Marcus told her something she didn't fully believe yet. "We didn't lose anything tonight. We just stopped hiding a mistake." 2 days later, the Port Authority's Evaluation Committee published a short procedural note that changed everything. Meridian's proposal had been submitted without a required compliance appendix, a customs clearance document the tender explicitly asked for. Nobody on their team had checked it, because nobody had taken the time to check it. They had been early. They simply hadn't been ready. Priya read that line from the committee 3 times before she believed it. She thought about Daniel's small request to double-check one appendix, the kind of request that rarely gets remembered once a deal is won. She made sure it was the first thing she mentioned when she told the board the news. Solace Maritime's proposal, submitted later but reviewed properly, met every single requirement listed in the tender. 3 weeks after that, Priya received the call she had been waiting for. Solace had won the concession. Not because they moved first. Because when it mattered most, they were paying attention. Marcus sent one message to the team that evening. "We didn't win because we were early. We won because we were on the ball when it counted." Priya replied with something I found far more interesting than a celebration. "I used to think the early bird gets rewarded just for showing up first," she wrote. "Now I think it only gets rewarded when it's actually looking for the worm." That's the misunderstanding almost everyone makes with this saying. The early bird catches the worm. We hear it as a simple instruction to move fast, to arrive before anyone else, to claim the advantage of timing alone. But timing was never the real advantage in this story. Attention was. Marcus wasn't rewarded for being cautious for its own sake. He was rewarded because he noticed something small before it became something catastrophic. Daniel wasn't rewarded for speaking up loudly. He was rewarded because he had already seen the problem, quietly, days before anyone asked him to. And Priya wasn't punished for wanting to move quickly. She was tested on whether she could recognize, in the moment that mattered, that speed without accuracy is simply a faster way to fail. Meridian arrived first, and it cost them everything, because arriving first was the only thing they had prepared for. Solace arrived ready, and being ready is what being early was always supposed to mean. In every negotiation I have ever advised on, the person who spoke last often won more than the person who spoke first. Not because silence is powerful on its own, but because it usually means someone was still paying attention while everyone else had already decided they were finished. That is diplomacy in a single sentence. It rewards whoever notices the detail the room agreed to stop looking for. I have sat across the table from executives who arrived at negotiations early, dressed sharply, folders ready, and still lost the room within the first 5 minutes, because they had prepared their opening line and nothing else. I have also watched quieter negotiators arrive with fewer slides and win entirely, simply because they were still listening when everyone else had already started planning what to say next. Timing opens the door. Attention decides what happens once you are inside. Would you have made the same decision Priya made, knowing it might cost you the lead? Or would you have trusted the numbers you already had, and submitted while you still could? I would love to know what you would have done, and whether you have ever faced a similar choice in your own career. Thank you for spending this time with me. Somewhere, right now, someone is deciding whether to send an email a little too quickly, simply because waiting feels like losing. Perhaps the real advantage was never about who arrives first. Perhaps it was always about who is still paying attention when it counts. If any of these expressions felt unfamiliar the first time you heard them, listen again. Most of what makes a language feel natural only becomes visible the second time you notice it. I'm Alice Frost, and I will see you in the next story.